So you have a decent camera, maybe even one that's top of the line, but if your real estate photos are still not looking professional, then it's not the gear, it's your techniques. So what I want to do in this episode is share with you some pro tips that you can apply to just about any camera, any lens combination, and your entire workflow actually, so that you can get better, high quality, professional looking real estate photos. Now the key to all of the tips that I'm going to share in this video rely on a principle that's not just specific to real estate photography, but many other genres as well, and that it's more about how than it is what. When it comes to camera brands, those things really don't matter nowadays. Whether it's Sony, Canon, Fuji, Nikon, doesn't really matter. Everybody makes just about the same quality camera. But the key to this really is that these things are just tools. Your camera, your lens, those are just tools. And just like any other tool, a tool can help you get a job done faster. It may give you a little bit more quality, but the thing is, it's how you use the tool that counts the most. And that leads us to tip number one, and that's that you should be shooting with intention. You don't want to let the camera make all the decisions for you. It's too common and too tempting to think that we can get by with just, for instance, auto exposure. Let's say you're doing HDR and you're doing bracketing, and just let the exposure just be automatically detected by your camera. Also make sure that you are confirming your focus and that you are also confirming your white balance. Now those things really don't take very long. When it comes to adjusting your exposure and your white balance, all those things, with a mirrorless camera, you've got a live view on the back screen of the camera. You've got that WYSIWYG view. These are very simple adjustments to make, but the thing is, don't let the camera do all the thinking. You're the photographer, shoot with intention. And these things will help especially when it comes to editing. And it doesn't matter if it's going to be you or an editor who's doing your editing. But if you are outsourcing your editing to another editor, then, and you're still not having pro results, it might not be the editor, it might be you. You need to first take a step back and try to edit your own photos, because you might be capturing substandard footage, making a lot of other mistakes that we're going to cover in this video, and it makes your photos just very difficult to edit, and then you'll get substandard results and they just won't be pro level. So this isn't to be mistaken that you have to do all your own editing. If you do want to outsource, that's fine, but make sure that you're providing the editor with footage that can be edited to a pro level. And that leads us into the next tip, and that's to remember that lighting is everything. So it can be very tempting to rely a lot on ambient light, because we take a look at natural light and it can look beautiful in person, but the camera sees things differently because our minds are interpreting things that the camera can't. So this is where, if you're doing HDR, you might be relying too much on ambient light. And as you've probably seen me show in a lot of other videos, that there are some differences between using HDR or using lights. And that's why pros, all architectural and design photographers, and many real estate photographers will incorporate flash at least to some degree. For instance, using the flambient technique, you've seen me talk about this a lot on this channel, that I can get a lot of control. I can get very high quality photos, and of course then you can charge more for it as well, and you can get higher end work. But even if you didn't use flash and use HDR, you have to be careful on how much ambient light you choose to use. But by using flash, you are going to get pro results if you do it right. The flambient technique is a great case for that, where you're gonna get color correct images. You're going to get very sharp images, and you're going to be able to control where the light, exposure, and shadows, all that falls under your eye and anybody else looking at your photos. It's something I've said a million times before, you've probably heard me say it, is that when you control the light, then you control the image. So if you're relying entirely or heavily on ambient light, whether it's going to be entirely with HDR or partially with doing flambient, for instance, to compensate for some of your possible shortcomings in your lighting techniques, then you're going to struggle. You can't rely on ambient light all the time. And so if you are, you're going to get substandard results. And that leads me into something I did want to just mention real quick before moving on to the other tips in this video. And that's that if you do want to learn more about real estate photography, I'd invite you to take a look at my courses on real estate photography. I've got courses that cover professional interiors, expert editing, exteriors, videography, business and marketing, and I've also written best-selling books on real estate photography as well, and I have links to all of that down in the description for this video. Moving on to our next tip, and that's that composition is a skill, it's not a preset. So all too often, we all try to find automated ways of doing our editing or shooting, anything to reduce time, make it easier on us so that we can get higher profits. But the thing is, composition is actually an easy thing if you pay attention to it. It's one of the reasons, if you take a look at my book Shot List, I've got over 200 examples of different compositions and why you would use those. But when it comes to composition overall, a few general rules. If you're shooting ultra wide, you're going to inevitably have, at some point, you're going to have some less than professional looking photos. Now, there are times that you do want to shoot ultra wide. For instance, in this shot, single point perspective, this is racked out at 14 millimeters. But notice the key here to that photo is that there wasn't anything close to the camera that was distorting it, and the subjects were not that far away. If you have something that's too close to the camera, you're going to get a lot of extension distortion. It's going to have that wide angle distortion, just looking unprofessional. Sometimes it's unavoidable, and yes, it's very important for everybody, whether it's for realtors, whether it's for architectural and design clients, they will all want capture it all shots. Now, it doesn't mean that everything is that way, especially architectural and design. There will be vignettes and some tighter shots. But everybody will want capture it all, but you have to be very careful. Think about angling and composing so that you don't get extension distortion, that where things very close to the camera are highly distorted. The same goes for staging items. If you're shooting a kitchen, something else, and on the counter, closest to the camera is some type of staging item, you might want to push that back farther into the frame a little bit so that it's not just glaring at you right at the edge of the counter. The other thing too, and we talk about this all the time with being real estate photographers, verticals are important, but it's worth re-emphasizing this because if you're pointing your camera down or up or it's crooked somehow, it's just going to look unprofessional. But geometry overall is extremely important and it's overlooked. Too much concentration goes into verticals. Yes, they are important, but you also don't want to have your images rotated, which can give you deceiving results sometimes trying to adjust your verticals. And very important, if you want those real high-end, high-impact architectural type of shots, those single point perspectives, your horizontals gotta be nailed. You gotta get those right in camera. Trying to adjust those in post, you'll have a perspective problem because things will have been farther away from the camera depending on where the camera was, because some things will fade farther away down the perspective, down the vanishing point. So you need to make sure that you're centered properly, and while you're looking through the frame, that you get those horizontals as accurate as you possibly can. The next tip is that editing is half the job, and this doesn't matter if you're gonna outsource or you're gonna do your own editing. The fact is, shooting with intention, like we talked about earlier, is that you will know if you've got good footage. If you haven't edited your photos or you struggle to, so you just immediately start outsourcing all of your photos to be edited, you're not going to shoot as well. You have to remember that someone has to edit your photos, whether that's you or an outsource editor. So if you're sending garbage out, you're going to get garbage back. So make sure you shoot with intention, and that bear that in mind that, well, editing's half the job. As you're taking your footage, somebody's got to edit this. I got to make sure that it's good. And if you want really pro results, you got to learn to edit it yourself. When you get real busy, then think about outsourcing it to someone you can coach and train to do the type of editing that you do that produces those high-end results. Speaking of editing, it's the next tip, and that's don't overdo it. Too often we do one of two different things. First thing is we might get analysis paralysis. Looking at the photos just so much, we start missing stuff. So this is very common if you're doing landscape photography. If you're out shooting the Milky Way and you're going to have one photo, you're going to work on it every night for a week, yeah, you're going to spend a lot of time. When you're doing real estate photography, you've got 2 or 3 minutes to edit a photo. Architectural and design, you have a little bit longer. But for the most part, you got to keep that editing time down, which is why you want to get it as right in camera as you possibly can. But the thing is, even when you're doing that, and if you're editing very quickly, you can make some common mistakes of oversaturation, bringing the shadows up too much. I see this too often with HDR. HDR can look good in some cases, but what makes HDR look worse is when you lift the shadows and everything just looks like it's ethereal. It looks like something out of a bad painting. You don't want that. You want to make sure that you keep things like your contrast, your levels, your curves if you're using them, your shadows, everything across the tonal range needs to be kept in check, and don't over sharpen. What'll happen is when you're using these photos, especially for real estate, and they're going to be syndicated out to different websites like Zillow and whatnot, every time they get syndicated out, someone's going to crush them. And so whatever their engine is, so you really don't want a lot of sharpening in your real estate photos. No one's going to blow them up and go right up on them an inch away to see if they're sharp or not. That's pixel peeping. So make sure that you don't overdo your editing, and you'll definitely start seeing some differences in your results. And then there's the little things that are so often overlooked while you're on site doing real estate photography. Things like making sure that the toilet seats are lowered, that you don't have staging items that I mentioned earlier might be too close to camera, that they're going to be distorted, that the pillows maybe got knocked over when they're outside on some lawn furniture, or that the dog happened to run into the room and take a pillow out and now there's one missing. Sure, technically speaking, that's not your responsibility, but it is your responsibility to know if something isn't quite right and either tell the client that this needs to be done or suggest to the client it needs to be done, or just go do it yourself. If a pillow's knocked over, go set it back up. It took you 10 seconds to do it. That's no big deal. But especially if you can communicate these things with your client, it shows that you have that eye for photography, for real estate photography. Those are things that make a lasting impression. Someone who comes in to a house and just sets up, takes a shot, sets up, takes a shot, moves to the next one, takes a shot, doesn't communicate anything to the client, well, immediately the client thinks that they're isolated, that you are an island and you're not participating. But if you can show and share your expertise, it makes you look like an expert. But moreover though, when we're talking about making your photos look pro, those are simple mistakes that just can make your photos look unprofessional. You could have all the best lighting in the world, but if something's out of place, a garbage can is in the picture where it shouldn't be, pillow overturned like I mentioned, then your photos definitely will lack that professional appeal. So remember that it's probably not your gear. Sure, getting a really good camera and getting a really good lens, those things can help. They really are more time reduction tools and to help you get better photos more quickly. But really, it's a lot of technique, and this falls in line with so many other genres of photography. And along with those other genres of photography, the more you practice but stay attuned to these various things, then the better you'll get at them. The more you'll start seeing the next time you go out on a shoot, oh, I should probably do this. Next time you edit, maybe I should do this instead. And over time, if you stay attuned to these things, you will constantly improve to make even better and better real estate photos.